I'll try to speak as loudly as possible. We're supposed to have a mic. I'm not generally known as being a loud speaker, but so hopefully you guys will be able to hear me. I'm also don't consider myself a good ad hoc speaker, so I wrote a speech. Got my speech in my bra here, and there's actually a reason why I have it in my bra, and you guys will find out about it in a few seconds. I can't remember.
Say who you are.
Oh, my name is Beth Rogers. I live on Brigadoon Drive, so like a block from the Keltys. I can't precisely remember when my friendship with Miriam began. I think it was more than a decade ago when I was a member of the Bannockburn Pool and had my bra stolen from the changing room cubbies. Shortly afterwards, Miriam had her bra stolen, and she called me, and we spent some time speculating as to what was happening and who would do such a thing. I have to say this particular mystery has never been solved. Over the years, we discovered we had another weird thing in common. We both have natural monovision, making us rare people in our respective age brackets who don't need glasses to read. For a while, our peculiar eyesight and our stolen bras were our main connection. Then, 7 years ago, I realized my mother had Alzheimer's, and Miriam became a font of wisdom that I tapped into frequently. Miriam spent so much time shepherding me to various resources and helping me. Once she came over on short notice and spent a couple hours on our deck talking with me and my sister. Miriam was such a calming, wise presence in the maelstrom of the disaster surrounding my mother, and I owe her so much, and I think so many of you here in this room owe her something too. Over the years, as my mother faded, I relied on Miriam more and began to think of her as my second mother. I would often introduce her to people as my second mother. That's how much regard I had for her. 2 days ago, I sat down at my desk to call Miriam to see if she was up for a visit now that we'd all been vaccinated, and to ask her an important question about Nan. Called the house phone and listened to Ed's voice on the recording. I called her cell phone, and it was kind of unusual for it not to pick up. Then I looked at the computer screen right in front of me and saw the email that had come in from Joanne 20 minutes before. I started swearing so profusely that my husband came running in alarm. I'm angry that I'm not going to have that last conversation with Miriam, or another opportunity to remind her of how important she's been to me and how thankful I have been for her friendship and guidance. One thing I've always been fascinated with is end-of-life issues. Not too many people have the stomach for such discussions, but Miriam certainly did. We had numerous conversations about the quality of life versus the quantity of life, about dying with dignity, and what our directives were for our own life's end. I knew that while she was sad, she was at peace with Ed's decision not to prolong his life. So, along with the rage and sorrow I have that I won't be able to talk with her again, I also feel a sense of calm. Miriam was diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis years ago and knew she was living on borrowed time. But to be honest, all of us here are living on borrowed time, and it's up to us to make the best of it. I had a pretty good sense of what Miriam's wishes were, and I knew that for her this was probably the best way she could have departed this earth, with the minimum of suffering, surrounded by her family, and I appreciate Ruth and Joel for validating that. Right up to the end, she kept doing the things she loved, many of which revolved around Nan. She was someone who was phenomenally busy. Whenever I called her, she was usually in the midst of a Zoom meeting. She enjoyed being helpful. She enjoyed being vital. She worked to the end, sound of mind undiminished. Many in this room didn't know she'd been ailing because she had just been in various meetings with them, like literally the day before. I know many of us here feel unmoored without Miriam. She was our lodestar. She, more than most, was responsible for what makes Bannockburn such a community. I suggest that to commemorate her passing, all of us do what we can to strengthen the fabric of Bannockburn. It will take many of us to fill the hole she is leaving behind, but it can be done. She would be pleased with that. I know from living in Bannockburn for 30 years and editing the newsletter for 3 that there are many other often unsung heroes in this neighborhood. I run into them all the time. I can't begin to enumerate how many people in this neighborhood are quietly contributing despite substantial personal challenges of their own. I know people who set up for this event who are struggling with things that aren't commonly known. The number of people who are dedicated to this neighborhood is impressive. My suggestion to all of us gathered here is that the best way to honor Miriam is through service, whether it's to this neighborhood or somewhere else. Get involved with something, if only for an hour or two, help someone in need, work to make the world a better place.
Mom, or whatever we called her, because she played so many roles. We all in the neighborhood know her involvement with Nan and with everybody's lives, deep involvement in our lives. But I was lucky enough, my name's Keith Parsky, I got to direct her and Ed in the spring show. And
I'm so sorry.
They had one thing they had that was kind of an obstacle when you're singing songs and performing in a spring show. They didn't have rhythm and singing, but they had the comic sense. They had comedic timing. And on my way here, it's fitting. I was rushing out the door, and I stepped in my dog's bowl and got a hot dog. And guys, I mean, I think they're up there pulling pranks. They're doing something. I had the good fortune, as I say, because I knew that singing wasn't always a strength for folks in the neighborhood, and but you take the gifts they have, and so I liked making them animals. I made them trees, and I'm thinking they can't get in trouble there, but they would steal every number they were in as the animal. Well, I put her as an animal with Mike saying, well, they were 2 deers, the deer and the doe and the deer. So that, you know where that went. But as the trees, I thought, well, I don't know what's gonna happen here. But it was just the antics. They have the facial expressions. They were so funny on stage that they would draw everybody's attention. And I think in life they did that, but they certainly did that on stage. And we were very lucky to have them, and they brought a lot of humor to all of us. So that's all I have. Anybody else? I could go long, but I.
It's Miriam Kelty, and I remember about 3 years ago. So my sister and I went to McDonald's with my grandma, and she usually always got the Egg McMuffin thing. I forgot what it's called, but stuff. Yeah. And then I asked her, could we get some ice cream? It was right early in the morning because they sell a great breakfast in the morning if you weren't late. So we got some chocolate ice cream. Then after that, she said that we could get some soda. So I was like,
That's for grandma.
Then Morgan and I were so happy. So then she said, okay, do you guys want any chicken nuggets? And then we were like, yes, please. And then I think there was a playground there. So we went to the playground. And then Grandpa was there. And I think he wanted chocolate milk. So then we got him some chocolate milk. And then we went home in our car. And we were stuffed.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank the prior speaker as well, and underscore that Nan was really Miriam's baby. When she retired from NIH, created it here. She had a vision that was shared by the organization of villages, but she truly believed that people in a neighborhood should help each other. And that's a tough vision in a modern suburban neighborhood. Finding the ways in which that happens and it grows naturally and people become committed to it. And she pursued that using all of her skills, using all of the talent that she developed in senior executive positions at NIH and in other positions. And she did it in a very organized way. She collected data, she wrote reports, she managed the liability to vet the drivers who were driving Bannockburn's senior citizens to be sure that was done properly. I just want to say it, and that is that there is no other single person I know in my years in Bannockburn who has given more of herself to this neighborhood than Miriam did. And Miriam and Ed as a team were just, you know, it's unbelievable that that a couple of years ago we had both of them and they were both working, and now we have neither of them. And it's very, very tough. But in any case, she created NAN. Our commitment has to be to keep it going, keep it strong. We cannot run it the way she did, I don't think. We don't have those skills. She ran NAN. She had a board. People tried to help her in many ways. Everybody had a role to play, but it was her vision, her conception, and of how that should take place. And this is going to be a challenge, but I think the community's got to step back and figure out how we keep this thriving. And she's left it in a good condition, and it has an increasing role to play after the pandemic. Now that people are getting out again and they have needs, and that's really on us.
Passing, and some of this is repetitious, or I just tried to cut it down so that you just got a flavor of what I received. We are so very sad to hear of her death. Miriam will be sadly missed as a person and as an integral part of the early service. Miriam was such an accomplished, smart person. She will be missed. This is terrible news. I remember her as one of the most frequent attendees at the early Shabbat service. I was very saddened and upset and shocked to see that Miriam died. She was a very important member of the early service. It is a big loss for all of us. She was a remarkable woman. My wife wrote a note to Miriam's boss when she was working at the federal government level. I wanted to let you know that Miriam Kelty passed away this morning. I know she worked for many years at NIH and you, and she had a close working relationship. I thought you would want to know. And he replied to her. His name is Richard Hoddes. I am so very sorry to hear this and appreciate your letting me know. Miriam and I worked closely for many years, and I enjoyed tracking her recent activities in the NIH bioethics community. She was a remarkable woman. I will share this very sad news with others who work with Miriam. Best regards, Richard Hoddes. I have known Miriam for probably 30 to 40 years. There have been two people who have coordinated all of the Torah reading that we have at the early service. Miriam has done this for probably close to 30 years. She will be dearly missed. I will miss her very, very much because as so important to running of the service. And that's why every year at the time of our anniversary, I always make a big deal about thanking her for everything that she has done, because it is such a difficult job. And something like this is not easily replaced. So I will miss her.
To Bannockburn in '69, and I think the Keltys came there too. And our families have grown up together, Joel and Ruth, and our kids were growing up together. Miriam loved Bannockburn, and Bannockburn loved Miriam. And she was so generous, and Gina's gonna give an example of how generous she was.
I mean, you know, there's a social side to Miriam and Ed, and you know, they were at our parties and we went to their house. So it's a long-term relationship. But I want to give you one example of her generosity, which led to, I think, an unforgettable experience for both Elaine and me. Miriam, and I think Ed too, was a judge in what you older people would remember as the Westinghouse Talent Search, which became the Intel, which is now Regenerant, which brings 40 of the top high school students in the country to Washington, D.C. for a week, and they're in science.
Ruth was a judge.
But just, yeah, let me get to that. Miriam, I think, was a judge, and Ed was a judge, and Ruth was a super judge. But for quite a few years, Miriam could bring, and Ed could bring guests to this very elegant affair, culminating the week of these 40 high school students in a building downtown. And it was a black tie affair. So Ed and I would put on our penguin suits, and Elaine and Miriam would be suitably dressed. And I remember Ed driving the van downtown. You know, it was we always had to reckon with Washington traffic around 5:36, and we get there, and there was this open bar to start with, and there was this like a square, and there were kids on with their projects on easels, on all of that, and talking to those kids who were super bright, and have them explain their projects, much of which I did not understand. And then this dinner, wonderful dinner, and wonderful speakers, including one of the kids who was chosen by his and her peers to give an address. It was such an unforgettable experience, and I will always remember it was because of Miriam and Ed's too, their generosity in inviting us to this event, even though we didn't have any other connection except to Miriam and Ed.
Many years we went.
Yeah, for quite a few years. It really was an unforgettable experience of all the other wonderful experiences we've had with Miriam and Ed.
They're great friends. Great friends.
Yeah, it's just hard to believe that.
And Miriam and I shared a lot of things together. We ran the Neighbors Assisting Neighbors Association. I was on the board. We ran the Wise Elders Project. Who knows what the Wise Elders Project is? A few. This was an organization that worked with Whitman High School students, pairing them with wise elders. I always hated that term. Didn't feel wise at all. And the students would do oral histories with their wise elder and prepare a program which we then presented here at the clubhouse once a year. This year, just at the point when the kids were ready to meet their wise elder, COVID came along. And they had to do it all online, and they did their final project online also. But Miriam held it together. Just working with the students at Whitman was a trip. I had been one of the wise elders in the early years, and then I became part of the administration of the organization. I also teach the water exercise class here at Bannockburn Pool. She was the most avid member of that class. And she would come to the class, which at that time started at 8:30 in the morning. She had already played tennis for an hour. She had gone to her other exercise class at the Y for an hour. And she showed up at 8:30, having done all that activity before she even got to my class. And after my class, she swam about a half a mile. So it was really quite a shock to hear that she had died. I knew she had health problems, but I wasn't quite prepared. And I will miss her terribly. Thank you.
She, when I said the word, I'm Pazita Viva. I work for the Montgomery County Aging and Disability Services. I'm the village coordinator, and I've been working with Miriam since probably 2012 on different issues, so it's been a pleasure. And when I sent a notice to different villages that she had passed, one of the key words that people responded back was saying that she was a force. And there was something about the force of her personality that when she was intent on accomplishing a goal, you know that that goal is going to get accomplished one way or the other. And a great example is a good story. So before I was a village coordinator, I joined the Commission on Aging as a liaison. So I had no particular role, but I was just coming as a representative of a nonprofit I was working with. And at the time, the Commission on Aging, that was back in 2008, 2009, they're very focused on the very low income safety net for older adults, which is a very admirable and important goal. But when you think about Commission on Aging, you have to think more broadly than that. At the time, everybody in the Commission, I'm talking 30 to 40 people, were all of one mind, that the Commission is focused on safety net for older adults who are very low income. And then came Miriam to the Commission and single-handedly shifted the narrative slowly but surely. So the first time she made a comment, everyone was like huffing and puffing and what is she talking about? This is not what we're all about. And she was like doggedly intent on changing the hearts and minds of people in the Commission to let them know that the Commission on Aging is about everybody's aging in the county. And what does that mean? And what's her responsibility as representative to advocate on that behalf? And so she was the leading force in creating 2 positions. Sean and I think, have a job just because Miriam, I think. So thank you, Miriam, for getting me a job. It's so cool. But this kind of tenacity that was just not letting anything confuse her. And that was really amazing because people were a little intimidated by her force of nature because you can't really argue with Miriam. But there were so many instances where she would disagree with you, and then you would give her argument that makes sense, and she would stop and say, oh, okay, and completely change her mind and agree with you, which is so unusual because when people usually are bought into their opinion, they're like, this is my opinion and I'm married to it. But not Miriam. She will like, okay, you convince me and I'll go with you and change my mind. And so I just really love that sort of force of nature of her that was not just, it wasn't random. It was so thoughtful and deep and incredible.
My life with Miriam's in multiple ways. Miriam was my neighbor. She lived right up the street from me, so I'm a Bannockburn person. And we shared passions. I worked on the Commission on Aging with Miriam, and we both loved pottery, and we went to pottery classes together. So we had quite a bit in common, but one of my favorite memories of Miriam was Miriam sweetly called me and said, I heard that you've become a commissioner and the first meeting is coming up. I'll be happy to drive you, to the meeting and kind of introduce you to folks and whatever. And on the way to the meeting, we got totally and completely lost. But the conversation was so brilliant. She was so fascinating that I didn't even realize we were lost. We ended up being about half an hour late to the meeting. But she was the most brilliant, wonderful, caring individual that I have had the great pleasure to know.
My name is Susan Wexler, and somehow or another I'm the president of Bannockburn Community Club. And I want to just say how wonderful it is, even on this terribly sad occasion, to have everybody together and to feel the spirit of Bannockburn here after all of our isolation. It's just a really moving time. And I also want to say, I've lived in Bannockburn for 28 years, and I want to just kind of bring Miriam back to this space. That picture you see of her as you come in, I can't think of an event that I have come to in Bannockburn, which has been very many, where Miriam wasn't the pillar of the room. You know, people would just gravitate to her. She focused on you. She had interesting things to say. She had a plan. She had, you know, updates, and she cared so much. And as a following generation in this neighborhood, I can't tell you what an example she has set to me and to so many others here who want to impossibly try to take on some of the leadership that she has shown here. And so all of your stories about her just resonate so beautifully. And I'm so grateful to Joel and Ruth for coming here to let us have Miriam again in this context. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you.